Coming up,
Launch.
launch,
Test.
and I have an interview with this guy right here. Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins right now. And welcome to Tomorrow for Saturday, May 2nd, 2015. This is episode 8.14. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. Joining me is Emory Stagmer. We're going to get to him in just one moment. Before we do, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who've helped make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who've contributed at least $10 to this specific episode. To find out more on how you can help crowd fund this show, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. All right, Emory, let's get straight into this because you've got props, which is new and different for us. We're going to be talking about Sea Dragon today.
Yep.
Actually, before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've been with Tomorrow since we were Space Vidcast.
Sure.
You worked on the L-Cross program. I mean, you're a full-fledged like rocket scientist. You do really cool things. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know you'll be humble, but no, you are.
Okay.
You do really cool things. So who are you? What's
Okay, I am a satellite and systems software engineer. I work for the Northrop Grumman Corporation, and I've been with them for going on 25 years.
Wow.
I started with Litton Corporation in September 1990, and Litton was bought by Northrop in 2001. In '96, I met a coworker who I kind of knew, and I had been working on a very interesting program, and I was kind of like, okay, what's next? And I met a guy named Larry Linton. He was coming across the campus. We had a multi-building campus. And Larry stopped me and said, hey, how would you like to build satellites for NASA? And I went, okay.
like anyone watching would be like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
no.
It didn't take very long.
Yeah.
I worked on Earth Observing 1, and I worked on the Wilkinson microwave anisotropy probe that mapped the background radiation of the universe. It was actually it was out in space where the James Webb Space Telescope is going to go at a million miles out further from the sun than the Earth is. So in a line, the Lagrange point number 2 out past L2, million miles out from the Earth. And it mapped the background radiation of the universe, I think, 18 times. And they decided a couple of years ago there wasn't any point in doing 19 times. So they've decommissioned that satellite. Earth Observing 1 launched in November of 2000 and is still flying. It was a little technology demonstrator. It would fit in the studio area here.
So
it's just not that big.
10 by 10 by 10 maybe?
Yeah, it's like 6 feet across and 7 feet tall or something.
Sure.
I mean, it's just not that big a satellite. It's got a big solar array wing that sticks out off one side. It was designed for a 1-year mission. Mm-hmm. And the electronics were designed to really have a life of maximum 5 years, and we're coming up on 15. To my knowledge, the satellite has never even rebooted, so that's really pretty cool.
That seems to be a common theme
yeah.
in space. Does that just mean that maybe we're over-engineering some of this stuff, and maybe we can take some of these specs down a little bit? I know this has nothing to do with Sea Dragon, but it's just a random thing, right? I mean, Spirit and Opportunity, don't get me wrong, it's awesome that they went as long as they've gone, but if you paid all that money for it, maybe you could have spent less for something that didn't work as long.
Yeah, reliability engineering is a really difficult subject, and you kind of hit a threshold where a lot of times you have specifications where they say, okay, we need a 85 or a 90% survivability number that we think that there's an 85% chance that this satellite is going to survive for 5 years, 8 years, whatever the number is. And then they build all these statistical models, and pretty much every one of them has a little bit of margin built in. So you tend to build up margin on margin on margin, and so you do over-engineer a little bit, but it makes the customers happy, and so you do it anyhow. So to a certain extent, yeah, you do that.
It was just a weird random point. So you've worked on a ton of stuff
that has
flown in space / gone to the moon in one way or another.
Right.
So this is something we're going to talk about today, Sea Dragon, that was proposed but has never been built.
Never been built.
Never flown. So What in the world is Sea Dragon?
Sea Dragon is a very, very large rocket.
Okay, okay, that doesn't. What does very, very large mean?
I'm going to pull out my other models. One of the other models, real quick.
You brought more models.
I brought yet more models.
So this is Sea Dragon on the table.
This
right
is
here,
Sea Dragon.
Right? Yeah, you can see the whole.
This satellite, this rocket is 535 feet tall. Actually, there's a section down here that's a ballast tank, and actually makes it a little bit even taller than that.
All right. So it's a very, very large rocket, and you're putting up a scale, what would be a 1-to-1 representation of the Empire State Building?
This is the Washington Monument.
The Washington Monument.
In Washington, D.C.
Oh, so it's just a pinch shorter than the Washington
It's a little
Monument.
bit shorter and bigger around. The Washington Monument is 550 feet tall and 55 feet across at the base. Sea Dragon is 535 feet tall and 75 feet in diameter.
Okay.
Okay.
So
The little tiny cone up here on the top, which you probably can't even resolve in the cameras, this little cone on the top is the Apollo command module.
all right. All right.
All right.
So it's huge.
It's really huge. But the big thing about it is that it's simple.
Okay.
So this was designed by a brilliant rocket engineer named Bob Truax in the early 1960s. He worked for Aerojet General Corporation. And his concepts, there was two fundamental concepts. Number one, complexity drives cost more than linear, which means for every little bit extra complexity, it goes in a rising curve rather than a flat line. Okay.
Right.
Size drives cost less than linear. So twice as big isn't twice as much. It's only half again as much or something like that.
Sure.
Right? 75% more, not 100% more.
So making it more complex makes it way more expensive. Making it more big makes it more expensive, but not way more expensive.
Right. So Bob's concept,
More big.
even more big. Bob's concept is, this is your first stage. This engine bell is 75 feet in diameter.
So is there anything because it's hard to imagine an engine bell that's 75 feet in diameter.
It's impossible to imagine.
Do you have the first part of the Saturn V?
Okay.
So the F1 engine is huge, right?
Right.
This is the base of a Saturn V.
Right, so this is the first part of a Saturn V, and these are in the same scale.
Right.
Okay,
So you
let's just be real honest here how big that actually is.
So you can stick. Well, I mean, that's not the first.
It's not the first stage, but
you
it's
can
a quarter of the rocket.
You can fit all of the first stage engines inside just the bell of a Sea Dragon engine. But how does that, okay, so keep going.
Okay.
I'm going to ask how that's simpler than that.
So these engines are the F1 engines and the Space Shuttle main engines, and basically every other engine that we use today are turbopump-driven engines.
Sure.
Okay, so they have turbopumps that drive both the propellant, which is generally RP1, kerosene, or liquid hydrogen, which is much, much harder, and liquid oxygen.
Yep.
Okay. This has no turbopumps.
So how does that work?
How do you get the pressure in there? Okay, so there's a propellant tank, an oxygen tank, and a liquid nitrogen pressure tank.
Oh, so it just
All right.
forces
It's
the
a
fuels?
blowdown. It's what they call a blowdown engine. It's just a pressure-fed concept. So there's basically two valves and an igniter. Mm-hmm. No turbo pumps.
And so it just...
They're really big valves.
I bet. So the pressure of the fuel in the oxidizer is maintained by a
Right.
liquid nitrogen
Right.
tank, and it pushes the fuel into essentially the combustion chamber.
Pushes it into the combustion chamber. Now so the combustion chamber has pressure in it, and your engine nozzle is all about converting that high pressure, low velocity combustion into a low pressure, high velocity exhaust. This is what gives you the thrust. Okay, so yes, it's true. This isn't a very efficient design, but it's so God blessed big, it just doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right. And yes, the pressure will fall off as the pressurant is depleted.
But it
Right.
doesn't matter because it's so big?
It doesn't matter because it's so big and it's so simple. And this is designed to be reused. This whole first stage would have launched, and then, well, good, there's your second stage on it. When the second stage separates, the first stage just goes over and splashes down in the ocean.
And because there's not a whole lot of electronics or anything to worry about getting wet, it doesn't matter that it's
Right.
in the middle of the ocean. You just
Right.
dry it off. I'm oversimplifying it, but you dry it off and you just fuel it back up and reuse it again.
Yeah, there's no turbo pumps to get corroded or anything like that. Like I said, it's 2 valves and an igniter. So the idea is that they would
How powerful is that first stage? Right? I mean, I know it's huge, but how much as compared to, say, Saturn V?
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, the flame on this is going to be about a mile long.
That's insane.
All right, I mean, you know, so.
All right, so you're flying. Stage 1 is separated from stage 2. So it's a 2-stage system, or is it a 3-stage?
It's 2-stage.
Two-stage system. Stage 2 continues off, and this goes into space, and we dump this, or do we reuse this as well?
The original concepts were that we would dump this.
Okay.
This would become a.
And what drives this? The same exact system as the first stage? Where
Yeah,
we've got
the
a
only
pressure
thing that they
fan?
were going to do different with the second stage is that it was going to be hydrogen oxygen instead of kerosene oxygen.
Okay. Well, that's complex again, though.
Right there, you're dealing with cryogenic propellant and
It's hard to
liquid
hold.
hydrogen. Liquid hydrogen is nasty stuff in order to try and contain. Although today we're gotten pretty good at it. Hydrogen tanks and.
But this, that's the thing we didn't talk about. This isn't a design from today.
No.
This is a design from the 60s?
Early 60s.
Yeah.
This was actually a Saturn V competitor.
So why did the
Essentially.
Saturn V win over the Sea Dragon then?
Because the Sea Dragon's not interesting.
This seems very interesting. What?
It's technologically uninteresting.
But-
the rocket engineers didn't want to build it. They wanted to build complex, high reliability, high efficiency turbopump-driven engines. Right?
Even though it was a race, right? At that point, you could waste anything but time, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's a race, and it's not necessarily. Well, actually, it's a good point. It's not necessarily what system is better; it's what system can get us there faster.
Sure.
But it seems like this would have gotten us to the moon even faster, would it not?
Difficult to say. There's obviously going to be considerable complexity and issues with firing an engine that big. I mean, how do you test this?
Well, that's the other point is you can't, the reason it's called a Sea Dragon, and the thing we haven't talked about yet is you can't launch this on land.
The concept was that simple as possible, right? You should always try and do things as simple as you can. And so Bob Truax's concept was to launch this out of the water so that you didn't have to build any land-based infrastructure in order to handle this. There's no flame trench, there's no towers, there's no any of that.
There's nothing. You take the whole thing, right? And you float it out at sea.
Yep.
And then is this what sinks it? So
Yeah, this is a ballast tank, and I need to probably read up a little bit more on how this worked. But these round tanks at the bottom, I presume you can flood and pump
Sure.
out, and so our supports here would be blown. They would be hinged down here where I have them hot glued, and.
The real vehicle would not use hot glue. Is that
Probably
the
not
assumption?
use hot glue.
Yeah.
Although
Okay.
it would, it would separate as soon as it got warm. And they would have big explosive bolts. You got to realize how big these things are. This is a 30-story building.
It's freaking huge. So you take the whole thing.
I'm sorry, it's a 10-story building. It's 100 feet tall.
You've got the whole thing. You float it out at sea.
Right.
Then you sink it.
Right. And so this is floated out, built theoretically at a shipyard, floated out, tilted up this way.
You glossed over that. Built
I
in a
did.
shipyard. That's a key element. The infrastructure already existed. We could already do that because it was already using. We're not modifying these shipyards anyway. We're just building it as if we would build a submarine.
Yep. It is in fact basically a submarine hull. You could also use a hull from a oil drilling rig. They have the big 4 corners on them. They're almost exactly this size. Those are stock items that are available from shipyards today, in almost exactly this size.
Were they available yesterday? Were they available in this? So
Well,
this
then
was
they would have
designed
used
to
a submarine hull, right? And so that's the other thing about this. These hulls aren't thin aluminum, very high margin.
Sure.
They're just, super elegant and basically high efficiency. These are, 8mm thick steel. So you're talking about steel, it's about that thick.
So big and heavy.
Big and heavy.
Like a ship.
It's just a
It's
ship.
a ship.
It's a ship with a really big rocket engine on the bottom.
And it's a reusable ship as well because it's so big and heavy.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be able to take that impact.
Right. It's so over-engineered for the splashdown that, yeah, they will just
Actually,
survive.
they did tests. So
They did some tests.
there was
Small scale tests.
Small scale tests. Done. I think this is called drop test, and you sent over some video that we can take a peek at, and here it is. There's some vocals. I love the vocals.
Doesn't always confine his testing to his garage. This simulation was conducted in a nearby harbor to prove that his rocket could land in the ocean and be
So that was
recovered
much longer and
without
skinnier.
damage to its delicate instrumentation. NASA abandoned water landings when it introduced its own shuttle that could land like an airplane. But for Truex, the water landing is central to his theory.
Requiring a space launch vehicle to be able to land like an airplane makes about as much sense as it would have made in the old days to require that an airplane be able to land at a railroad station.
Now, I love that quote where he says, he's talking about building a rocket with wings to land on land is like trying to build an airplane that lands on a railroad track.
Train station, yeah.
I think that's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Is that, in your opinion, is that true? I mean, there are advantages to wings, but only during the last 10 minutes of flight.
Right, yeah, it's a brick pretty much until the last, 15, 20 minutes. I'm not a fan of winged vehicles for that reason. Yeah, you're
mass.
lofting, right? You're lofting and moving around a lot of mass that you don't use until the very last portion of the flight campaign. So yeah.
So
yes,
this is huge. This is using technology readily available in the 60s, using shipyards to build it basically like a giant submarine.
Yeah.
You float it out to sea as if it were a ship, right?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they'd attach a few engines on the back just so you could steer it and bring it out to sea.
Tugboat. Yeah.
Then you sink it, and it doesn't. It's not like the whole thing sinks. It probably sinks up to
the water line. I think the water line is right below these vernier engines. These are the engines that kind of steer it sideways.
Sure.
These parts that stick out here would have an engine,
Okay.
rocket engines up inside of them.
No, those have got to be huge as well. I mean, looking at the scale of this
Well,
thing.
basically, what you would do is today you would basically stick a Falcon 9 first stage up there. Okay.
So an entire Falcon 9 first stage multiplied by 4, mind you, to steer this vehicle.
To steer it.
Okay, so all right.
It gets a little ridiculous, right?
Okay, so the flame is a mile long, and we're launching this out at sea. So when we ignite that engine, what does the tsunami look like at that point?
I have
right?
no idea.
Because I mean that's
No
going to be
idea.
that's going to be an epic amount of water displacement that's occurring all at once. I have to imagine.
Yeah, they would probably take it down all the way to the equator, right? Because you get a lot more velocity for free at the equator than you do even in Florida, and so it would be quite a ways out at sea. I mean, it's only sunk into the water maybe 250 feet.
Oh, that's all.
Oh, only 200,
That's all.
only 25 stories down, and so it's not really going to cause a tsunami. I mean,
it's huge.
it's huge and it's loud.
So has anyone? I imagine it's
Yeah, I think I remember the number being 165 dB at 5 miles.
at 5 miles. Can you put that?
I can hear Donna laughing in the
for
back room.
people who are not audiophiles. How loud is a jet?
Oh, I don't happen to know.
I believe it's around 120, 130 somewhere in there, if I remember right.
125, 130.
Yeah, somewhere
Yeah.
in there. To put that into perspective.
And every 10 dB is twice as loud. It's a logarithmic scale.
Yeah,
Okay, so at 165 dB, it would cause physical bodily harm
At 5 miles.
at 5 miles.
5 miles away. Oh my gosh. All right.
For reference, the little tiny Saturn V that we showed, right, with these.
The little, wait, you just referred to it as a little tiny Saturn V.
I did,
All right,
I did.
yep.
This could be heard when it was launched from Kennedy Space Center. This could be heard in Orlando, which is like 50 miles.
Sure. This would be able to be, I mean, yeah.
You would hear that for.
You'd be shattering glass in Orlando.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, what if someone wanted to build one today?
The concepts run, and there are people who are actually trying to keep the engineering and the financials current to say, how would we do this today, and how much would it cost today? And so the numbers that I have seen are in the total development and flight test campaign, which would be 5 launches.
Sure.
Would be between $5 and $8 billion.
For how many launches? 5 launches? So about, we'll call that $8 billion for 5 launches. That's a lot of money per launch, but how much mass can I get into orbit?
This will put 1.1 million pounds to low Earth orbit.
That's a lot of mass into low Earth orbit.
That's a lot of mass. Okay.
That is a lot.
Okay. The largest thing that we can launch today is a Delta IV Heavy,
Sure.
which is 50,000 pounds to low Earth orbit.
And this was over 1 million pounds.
This is 1.1 million. This is 1,100. This is 1,100,000.
So
pounds.
your per cost launch is higher than most anything we have today. Although, interestingly,
If you figure in the amortization,
sure,
the actual cost of launching one is estimated to be approximately $500 million.
okay. Actually, that is not bad.
That's $300 a pound to low Earth orbit.
That's some of the best numbers we have today.
Yeah.
And is that the cost of launching it?
If it's not reusable.
If it's not reusable, what happens if it is reusable?
The launch costs go down.
Because you
get into the
have to build
300 million range.
So then you could be sub $100 per pound at that point, which seems to be the magic number, $100 per pound.
In the numbers that I had seen in the 1980s, in 1980s dollars, they were talking about something on the order of $20 to $30 a pound.
What would happen if this were built and it was reusable and we could get the cost of space, and so 2 things would happen. 1, we could bring the cost down to, say, $50 a pound. Let's just go high there. But 2, every time you launch, you get over 1 million pounds of payload to low Earth orbit, which means you're not going to get as much to, say, the moon or to Mars, but you're still bringing your entire colony with you at that. Like everyone can go all at once.
Sure.
What would that do to the space industry?
I think it would be a radical change, and I talked about this at Space Up DC 2010. Right, I did a talk on this, and the real interesting thing to me is the paradigm change that you get when you say, okay, your satellite can be. Let's take a good example, a today example, the James Webb Space Telescope.
Sure.
Okay, James Webb could be 750,000 pounds and 75 feet in diameter, because that's how big. What we're showing here is a manned capsule on top, just for argument's sake. What you would really have is a 75-foot diameter fairing that would be about that high.
Not a 75-foot tall diameter, a 75-foot
diameter.
Diameter.
Right, fairing that would be. You could put probably 100-foot tall objects inside. Okay, think about how big a telescope you could launch.
That's a 22.86 meter diameter.
Yeah,
So,
22 meters diameter.
So I believe the largest diameter fairing we have right now is around 5 meters or
5.
so. Yep. So 4 times larger just in diameter.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Anyhow, yes?
Crazy, right?
Crazy.
So the James Webb Space Telescope, right, could be launched fully deployed.
Yep. No,
right.
Well, that makes it simpler.
Way simpler.
Which makes it cheaper because you don't have to have deployment mechanisms
and
anymore.
you almost don't care how much it weighs. You could weigh 750,000 pounds. I'd have to do the math. You could do the 750,000 pounds, and then you could put another 350,000 pounds of propellant in order to get it to L2.
But what about vibe? I have to imagine that having an engine, right? Yeah, right. I mean, it's gonna be a wee bit shaky.
A wee bit.
Can anything survive that? Do we know
I have
how?
no idea.
We have no idea how.
There is analysis that was done of that in the original specifications, which are readily available on the internet, by the way. If you really want to do this and figure some of this stuff out and read up more on this, there's hundreds and hundreds of pages of all the original documentation.
You actually
all
have
available.
a few of them. I think I don't know what they're called, Dutta.
We'll set pointers to them in the show notes so people can go and read to your heart's content, because there's a lot. So where were they? Oh, the vibe. That was all analyzed. I mean, they figured all that out.
So it's survivable by humans then?
Yeah.
Huh. All right. Awesome. Daniel asks, can it be scaled down?
I would think so. And they did some subscale tests of something called a CB and something else called a seahorse. And the seahorse, yeah. So the seahorse wasn't nearly this big, but the seahorse was probably the diameter of one F1 engine. So I mean, it was
still big.
And it was a big rocket, and they used some existing. I don't think it was as big as an F1 engine, but they were using existing engines to prove the launch operations out of the water, which, as it turns out, the Navy thought was just terrific. It worked great. So yeah, they did some subscale. I wouldn't think today that we should start building this.
Okay, so what should we start building?
I would think that we should start building something, a subscale.
How much smaller, right? 'Cause this is a
crazy.
bit insane.
This is a bit crazy.
This is huge.
Maybe a third scale.
All right.
Okay.
That's still going to be a very large rocket.
A very large rocket. I mean, it's much larger than anything else we have today, and would probably put a larger payload to low Earth orbit than even the upscaled SLS. Okay.
The Block 2.
Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, it's still a really big rocket.
I think the Block 2 is 130 metric tons, if I remember right, to
Something
low
like
Earth
that.
orbit. That may be. I'm doing that.
That's
from
about
memory,
right.
So,
I think that's right.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, something in 130-ish.
So even that vehicle, let's just say we built a third, and that those numbers actually do work out, because we're just spitballing this. We could be wrong.
Yeah.
Even that vehicle could kind of change humanity's access to space.
I would think so.
Because once you start getting into sizes and weights of that measure, you can do more.
Yep.
Right? Because you need to be able to say, if we're sending humans to Mars, we need to send lots and lots of mass to Mars.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
Lots of stuff. We need to send habitat. We need to send food. We need to send water. I know there's water under the Martian surface.
On the Mars, yes.
On the Mars, yeah. But so Destructor 1701 is, can we please see the Saturn V model complete beside the Sea Dragon? So you've got the complete Saturn V model sitting under there.
All right. So here's.
And the Saturn V was mammothly huge. It was the second large. I believe the N1 was slightly larger.
It was a little larger in diameter. The N1 was,
Yep. But basically, the largest rocket we've ever built is right here, and this is towering over it in basically every way. And I love how the bell of the Sea Dragon just towers over a good chunk of the first stage. I mean, it goes up 2/3 of the first stage.
Yeah.
Of the Saturn V.
Yeah.
That's insane. It's
insane.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
But the mind-numbing thing is really what you can do with it, right? I mean, the entire space station can be launched in one launch.
Yes.
How many launches did it take to put up between the Proton and the space shuttle? And I mean, what was it? Like 20-something launches?
I don't even.
A whole pile, right?
It was a bunch of launches. Yeah.
At what? $500 million to $1 billion a piece? $10 to $20 billion just in launch costs to put up the space station?
I believe the shuttle was actually over $1 billion to launch each time, but I think I think it depends on how you look at the numbers.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wagging it. But it would cost, there was more money in launch costs than the entire development campaign for this.
You could do, it does, it changes everything when you can get something that size and bring the cost down.
Yeah.
And I think the key elements here are keep it simple, keep it inexpensive, and make it reusable.
Right.
And at that point, Elon has talked a little bit about being able to send hundreds of humans to Mars at a time.
Right.
A vehicle of this size, it seems like, just kind of, napkin math, it seems like you might be able to actually do that.
Yeah.
Although it would kind of suck having to float out at sea with all 100 people and then sink it. Everything's changing while you're doing this. Or maybe you sink it first and you could build a tower, but now we're adding complexity to it.
A little bit
right?
of complexity.
So, yeah, that
Sink
would
it
be kind of-
further down and then have people come out on a barge,
and then kind of pop,
pop it back up.
Yep. Let's see here. Why is the second stage so much bigger than the first stage, and why aren't rockets done like that anymore?
I really don't know.
All right. That was
going to have to admit.
That was from Quantum G. Yep. Asking,
figured.
great. And if you look at it, it is quite a bit larger.
Quite a bit larger.
Yeah. If you, it's a little bit larger. It's.
Well, you got to remember that's not
that's
the.
also the yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a third larger.
Now, there's an engine bell inside of here. Okay. So this is a skirt that would fall off, and there's an engine bell. This engine bell, same engine bell. Inside this skirt. Okay. So
okay, yep. So that's a large chunk of that's actually engine. If you hold it
Right.
up, right? So a lot of that's actually engine.
So you get about twice as much propellant, but it's not that much bigger.
I wonder do you know what second stage performance looks like at that point?
I don't.
Do you know?
offhand.
Do you know mass to like lunar?
Well, mass to
insertion orbit?
lunar is going to be about half
Okay.
at a wag.
So 500,000, 550.
500,000 pounds to lunar surface.
Again, that's a game changer at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
You could send entire colonies up at that point.
Yeah.
And Space Cadet 88 asked, I think we actually asked, kind of covered this a little bit earlier, was did anyone figure out what the damage would do to the ocean?
Yeah, no. I don't think an environmental impact study was ever
Well,
done.
they didn't really care as much in the 60s, right? Well, they
not
weren't
like that.
It's not that they didn't care. I think they just didn't know, right? It wasn't
Yeah,
something
we didn't have nearly the kind of understanding of the ocean ecosystems that we have today.
Although we still need more understanding of our own
Sure.
ecosystem and all that.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you know, Destructor 1701 also asks, what is the Sea Dragon's first stage engine bell supposed to be made out of?
Oh, I think it was all just steel.
Even the bell is steel.
I think.
Wow. I wonder if the steel could handle that much heat for that long. That's a lot.
The first stage only runs for a minute and a half.
Yeah, but you're running the second stage as well.
You run the second stage for a long time.
Quite a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be, a minute and a half? My brain didn't catch that right away when you said that.
Yeah,
Only a minute and a half.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's a lot of fuel. That is a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This thing is huge. So can it be built today?
Oh, yeah,
It wasn't
absolutely.
built. Well, not technically. Politically.
Oh, politically.
Politically, technically, could someone actually choose to build this today?
Could you get NASA to pay for it? Or could you get a government to pay for it? The
could you-
Russians might do it, I don't
Or would
know.
a private enterprise
But-
be willing to take a risk on this? Any one of them, right? Or a crowdfund.
Okay, let's-
Can we crowdfund Sea Dragon?
Let's be honest about this. Either Apple or Google could finance the entire development and flight test campaign out of petty cash.
I don't think it's quite petty
Quite
cash,
petty
but
cash,
yeah,
but you understand,
yep, they'd be able to afford it. It's not in their bit. So
It's not in their wheelhouse, but
a
right.
large business, a multi-billion-dollar, huge corporation could fund something like this. Politically, we'd be able to get it off the ground because a lot of people are going to say you're going to destroy our ecosystem with something like this.
Right.
Whether they're right or wrong,
Right.
with or without the studies, there are going to be people that are just going to go, you absolutely can't launch. There are people that do that today, saying
Sure.
that we're destroying the world by launching through atmosphere. So, yeah, I know.
Okay, fine.
What about governments? Can governments do it? Would a government do it?
Would a government do it?
Yeah, I guess the answer is always yes, you can do it. You can do it technically, but would you do it?
It's all about national will, right? Are we willing to make the kind of investment that would be necessary in order to get the kind of return that this would get us? I don't know. If you can really convince people that, yes, it really returns, the return on your investment is enormous, then they have to say, well, but it's $8 billion that you're going to take away from something else, which is patently and provably not true. The national budgets are not a zero-sum game. If you're really willing to say, this is not a cost, this is an investment, every dollar that we invest puts more than $3 back into the economy, then you have to say, is it worth the investment? If I could invest in a business today that would give me a guaranteed 300% return on my money with a 50-year track record, how much would I invest in it? Every nickel I could dig out of the couch, because I would have 3 nickels next year. Right? Well, that's NASA. It's the government accounting office, the numbers we hear bandied around a lot of times are 7 times or even up to 17 times. And the government accounting office, when those reports came out, said, no, that's really not accurate. I went and found them one day and I didn't bookmark them, and I have to go back and do some Google foo and try and find it again. They said, no, the numbers are really like 300%. They're not 700%.
But that's still an incredible number.
Yeah, even if it was 103%, not 300%, you're still talking about a positive return on an investment that I think that the government needs to realize that that's what it's doing. You need to convince Congress that it's investing in the future, not spending money today.
That
right?
is a hard sale.
It is. But you have hard numbers to back it up. You have the government accounting office reports, and they say, yes, this is really the real deal. High-tech investments like NASA, like atomic energy, those kinds of things return more money to the economy than you put into them. And if you want to build and grow your economy, you need to invest. And the best investments are the highest tech investments. Government accounting office report. I have to go find it again.
Is that only NASA? Is it only in the U.S. that that's the case? What about Russia? Couldn't Russia build this? What about China? Couldn't China build this? Why does it have to be the U.S.?
China could build it. We know China could build it. They have the manufacturing. They have the technology. They can the government can invest money there in ways and in kind of time frames that are difficult for us to get our Congress in order to do it. A top-down government like China, yeah, they could just say, we're spending $8 billion on this. Go do it. And they would get it done. They could do it.
So
absolutely.
Then from a nationalistic approach, what happens? I mean, so China builds it, and let's just say they're successful. Wouldn't they become the superpower of space at that point?
Absolutely.
I mean, this would enable them to do things that we can only dream of today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So with that, what happens if that happens? Let's say China does build it. Do we try to build one now? Is there this race?
Oh, I would hope so.
Is there this race for Sea Dragon class vehicles, or are we going to enter into a part? The thing with Sea Dragon is it's designed to be simple. That is my big takeaway here, right?
Sure.
Everything is super, super simple. Nothing to go wrong, as reusable as possible. But as soon as you get engineers mucking their fingers in there, right? They're gonna be like, well, but we can be more efficient if we just complexity. That's just a little bit of complexity. But over here we could be more efficient if we just complexity. Before you know it, this super simple vehicle is actually just as complex as this fairly super simple vehicle right over here. So can this be built from an engineering standpoint and actually keep it this simple, or do you think everyone's going to muck it up?
Good. That's where you have to hold the line. That a quote that I've heard attributed to Albert Einstein is that everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. Right? It's a good mantra.
Do you have an actual mission plan? This is from Tars, from our new bot in the chat room, Tars.
Thank you, Tars.
Do you have an actual mission plan that would use the full Sea Dragon payload, or even a third of its version? So is there any sort of mission plan that can actually fully utilize that payload, or would it be going up with empty mass, essentially?
One of the interesting things that I read in, you had him on, James Dewar. You had him on talking about the thermal nuclear rocket program. And in that program, one of the things that they talked about doing was harvesting helium-3 from the atmosphere of Neptune. Now think about that. With this vehicle, you could loft enough propellant and a thermal nuclear rocket engine that you could do a free return trajectory flight out around Neptune. And as it turns out, in order to do that, you have to basically skim the top of the atmosphere. There is helium-3, free floating in the upper atmosphere of Neptune. So you could basically scoop it up as you went by and come back. And it's 18 months round trip because you're going so fast.
And what kind of engine did I need again?
A thermal nuclear engine.
Yeah, that's probably your stopping point on that one.
Well, but the key there is that what you need in order to do that is about 1 million pounds of liquid hydrogen as your propellant. And that's what this enables. One launch for that. You want to go get helium-3? go get it. The easiest place to actually go get it is Neptune.
Actually, that is an interesting point. You could turn this into like the amazing fuel depot.
Yeah.
Right? Your payload is the fuel. This whole section like up in here would be just, actually no, it would be like right
all
here.
This, oh yeah,
all this
fuel
up here.
here.
Yeah, it would be fuel. And you just send that up and then you use smaller Saturn V class. Smaller Saturn V. Those are words I never thought I would say. To go to the moon or Mars or wherever. Sure. But those launch from land, which might be a little bit easier and better for humans. One would have to, again, analyze and look at that whole program.
Well, if you're going to engineer something this large, would you really launch it out of the ocean? Or would you build a dedicated launch facility for it? If you built basically a man-made tidal basin that was 500 feet deep in the middle and about a mile across, now that's a large engineering project, but it's basically seawalls and large excavation. You build canal. This is one of my crazy wild ideas. You build canal locks that go from the ocean into this thing, so it flows in and out with the tides. Right, you can control, make sure that it doesn't get all stagnant and all that kind of stuff, and then you can launch out of there, and then you're not killing the whales.
Sure,
right.
That makes sense.
You have a purpose-built engineering tidal basin. You flood it in. You bring the rocket in through the canals, through the locks. You bring it in. You can control the in and out. You can control the wave splash back out into the ocean. You design the whole thing so
it's
that
got to be in the middle
the
of
water,
absolutely nowhere, though.
Or Brownsville, Texas. I mean,
Like I said, the middle of absolutely nowhere. All right. Did you? So Time Trader asks, did you consider that the loss is much greater compared to a smaller rocket failure if you lose one of these?
Oh,
so
yeah.
right, it takes 100 of those to equal one of these, or so whatever the number is. If you lose one in 100, you've only lost
1/100th.
1/100th, as opposed to this, you lose one.
Large, whatever
you've lost
it is.
A huge amount of payload.
Yeah.
So is there any trade-off there, or is that just a trade study that you just have to...
Yeah, that's just an engineering study. You have to be willing to understand and mitigate those risks in the right way.
Have you ever thought of building it yourself, or finding a way to build it yourself, crowdfunding it?
Like I said, there's actually some people who keep the numbers current on this in order to try and figure out how you would do it and how much it would cost. And so yes, I'm in communication with those people.
If you had the means, would you do it?
Oh, hell yeah.
What do you need? Other than is it just purely money? Is it you just need to find a way to raise $8 billion? It's not really $8 billion. It's $8 billion for 5 flights. Do you need all 5?
That would be the whole test regime. Like I said, I think you would start building a subscale model in order to understand what it takes in order to fire an engine bell that big. And you need to work your way up. So really, you wouldn't really build something that you could fly. What you'd build is something that you could test. So you build something half this big around and work your 3/4 this big around and work your way up. You've got to figure out, I think that the thrust on this was 80 million pounds. So you've got to figure out how to constrain 80 million pounds of thrust.
Put that into perspective.
That's a really big test stand. Let's just say it's more like a mountain.
The F1 engine was just over 1 million pounds of thrust each, if I remember.
Like
1.5 million pounds of thrust each for the F1, if I remember right. Something around in there. So, and this is 80 million pounds, and there's only one. There's one engine.
And there's only one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very cool. All right.
The numbers, the scale of those numbers, though, 1.5 times 5, right? 7.5 million to 80 million. That's one of the reasons of this, the way that the blowdown engine is working, though. Think about how much less efficient that is. It's a lot less efficient. It's a lot more engine. It's a lot more mass, and for a lot less, for not as much scale-wise as thrust that you're getting.
But it doesn't matter, right? You're trading efficiency for simplicity.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to leave you here for space. You're actually going to be our first guest that stays here the entire show. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll leave you here. We're going to do some of our space news with us and our viewer comments. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about what happened this last week. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Rising from the ocean, far from land, these rockets of the future will be too large. The deafening roar of their engines too loud. The explosive power of their multi-million-pound propellants too dangerous for land-based facilities. Afloat as vessels of the sea, however, they can be easily transported, easily launched, and, most importantly, easily recovered for use in other missions. Because of the tremendous financial commitments involved in the development of large vehicles, such as the 80 million pound thrust Sea Dragon, any radical technique, regardless of how promising it may appear in theory, must be reduced to practice before it can be accepted as a major program.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. And nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving, the heat keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get started with some space news, I did want to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who have helped make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the producers of Tomorrow. These are people who have contributed $5 or more to this episode. If you'd like to help crowdfund the shows, you can find more information on our campaign over at patreon.com/TMRO. All right, welcome to CARIANN, joining us at Space News. We're at the weird round table still.
Yeah.
I want you to go ahead and get started.
All right. So
Ready to go.
Right. Launch. I almost said Atlas V actually, because after all what you guys were talking about, but this is an Ariane V launch. Launched 2 satellites. I believe we've got some footage at 2000 UTC Sunday, April 26th. There you go.
Allumage Vulcain. Allumage EAP, décollage.
Just leaps off the pad. It's so amazing. So it launched 2 satellites, a Thor 7 and a Sicral 2. Thor 7 is a multi-mission satellite, and it can use up to 25 active Ka band spot beams to cover the North Sea, Norwegian Sea, Red Sea, Baltic Sea, and the Mediterranean. It's to broadcast television services in Central and Eastern Europe. And then there's the Sicral 2, which is part of Italy's military satellite communication system. It's a geostationary satellite orbit, I apologize, that'll operate in the UHF and SHF bands.
Awesome. All right, so Space Mike's not joining us, so you will be taking the shoes of Space Mike. I need you to speak as fast and as energetic as he does.
Let him do a lot of this.
But SpaceX had a launch. Tell us about that.
SpaceX had a launch April the 27th at 23:03 UTC. The Falcon 9 rocket lifted off at 7:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is 23:03 GMT, on April the 28th, 2015, after a 49-minute weather delay. 2 burns by the upper stage's single Merlin vacuum engine propelled the Turkmenistan's 4,700-kilogram satellite, named Turkmen Alam 52E/MonacoSat, into a geosynchronous transfer orbit, a waypoint on the path to the craft's permanent operating post at 22,300 miles above the Earth.
2,200 miles would suck.
Yeah, that would be bad. The communications, well, it's kind of MEO orbit. Mid-Earth orbit. That is a thing. The communications portion of the satellite is being shared by Turkmenistan and Monaco. Thus, we have the combined name.
Which is super easy.
Yeah, I know. I stumble over it every single time. Another launch happened this last week. If you remember right, that we had like 2 launch calendars in the breaks this last week because of how many launches we had. This is the Soyuz launching the Progress M-27M. Here you go. And the engines fire on Soyuz, and then they just sit there for like a good 10 seconds.
This is just the pre-burn. They're not even launched yet.
Yeah, there we go. Now we've committed to flight. And off we go, and beautiful, successful ascent. That happened on April 28th at 07:09 and 50 seconds coordinated time. Like I said, that was carrying the Progress cargo ship, which had food and supplies. That's an unmanned craft. This was set for one of those 6-hour rendezvous with the International Space Station, one of those quick approaches, so it doesn't take 3 days to get there. It was going to bring 16,069 pounds. The freighter itself was 16,069 pounds, bringing 2.6 million
Wow.
That one, I'm just getting all my numbers wrong.
Yeah, you are.
2.6 tons of propellant, water, dry goods, oxygen, and all that other fun jazz up to the International Space Station. Oh, it would have berthed. It would have, or actually, yeah, it would have docked. I don't remember that one docks. Yeah, actually, that one docks. It would have been successful, except there was a wee bit of a problem, and looks more like this right now. Yeah, that looks okay.
Whoa,
that's bad.
There's the
That's
Earth.
bad, yeah.
That's cool.
And
Wait,
there's
there's
the
the
Earth
Earth again.
There it is again, and there it is again. And we're just going to go back to the control room shot at this point. They're like,
Wow.
oh, this is bad. Let's not show that.
Just kidding.
But if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the control room shot, they're going to give it to their engineers in a second here. They're going to be like, yeah, this is happening right now.
Just so you
you'll
guys
see it
know.
just spinning and spinning. It went into an uncontrollable spin, spinning once every 5 seconds. They did lose communication with the Progress spacecraft 1.5 seconds before the cargo carrier's planned separation from the third stage of Soyuz. The U.S. is tracking 44 pieces of debris in the vicinity of the crater of the.
It's not a crater yet.
It's not a crater yet. Of the spacecraft I meant to say spacecraft. This is going to be a fun space news segment for
Yes,
me.
it is.
Of the spacecraft and by the third stage of the rocket body. Now, this could have, this is lost, right? The Russia
Yeah,
tried
it's
to
gone.
regain control of it. They were unable to do that. They tried many different times. They could only do it when it's passing over Russian ground stations because Russia doesn't have something like TDRS, which is the tracking and relay
Tracking data.
relay satellite system. It's a single satellite is TDRS, and the whole system's TDRSS.
Yes.
So tracking data relay satellite system. There you go. Thank you. Anyhow, they don't have something like TDRS, so they had to do it only over ground stations, and they tried to send commands to get it under control. They were unable to do that, and as of, I believe it was last Wednesday, they were like, nope, we out. This is going to fall back to Earth. We're done. And so you've actually set up
Right.
Splashdown Bingo.
Splashdown Bingo.
So how do you play Splashdown Bingo?
You have to search on, this is a Twitter-only game, so you have to have a Twitter account. Search on hashtag Splashdown Bingo, and there are rules that'll pop up, and there are that you'll find in that search. And then next launch is the Twitter account that actually started the idea, and that's run by Twicked. Mm-hmm. So Daniel Knight, who's Mini Elon on Twitter, and Twicked and Next Launch and VAXHeadroom are the 4 accounts that you'll see referenced there. The rules are on my WordPress account, Vax's Headroom, so there's places I can type more than 140 characters. And so the rules are there, and we're tracking the who's got what square on Reddit.
You call it Splashdown Bingo, but it's more like Splashdown Battleship, where you need to choose.
choose
You've
a
got a
square.
grid of the Earth. You choose the
Right.
square where you think
Right.
it's going to splash down, and what's the winner get?
Okay, so the winner gets a 3D printed model. Obviously, I have a 3D printer because I have all these little things. So the winner gets a 3D printed model of a Progress. Actually, it's a Soyuz because at that scale they look essentially
The same,
identical.
yeah.
Right. So I believe the model's going to be about that tall. It's printed in a couple of pieces, and I'll make you a little thing that says you were the Splashdown winner, Splashdown Bingo winner, with the date and time and coordinates and what your thing was.
That's a fun thing. We'll talk about more of that
That'll be fun.
after dark. Yeah.
So-
The next Progress launch was set for August 6th. However, because this may not have actually been the Progress vehicle, this could have been the upper stage of the Soyuz, there's a possibility that that will be delayed. Also, all the human spaceflight stuff, that could be delayed too. They need to look into it. We're not saying it is delayed, we're just saying it could be delayed. More data needs to come back as to what actually happened before any determination will be made. So that's the bad news. Let's talk about some epic, amazing stuff that happened this last weekend.
So, you know how Blue Origin has been doing stuff and like kind of not telling anybody and then sort of just suddenly does stuff? They did stuff and then they told us about it and it's really awesome and I think we've got some footage.
Yep, there you go. What are we looking at?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Thursday, April 30th. This is the New Shepard booster, really. It's a 60-foot booster that is powered by the BE-3 engine. This reached about 307,000 feet. This is Blue Origin's vehicle. You saw Blue Origin with their brand new logo as far as I'm concerned, and a great big feather. Which is Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. Their website has been completely redesigned. They're actually having a huge focus on suborbital / commercial astronauts. So they want to be able to get people, much like Virgin Galactic, into sort of a low Earth orbit sort of situation, so you can see the curvature and all that other fun stuff. This camera angle is amazing. They also want to be able to have research payloads as well. So they have so the commercial spaceflight participants, you can do just the commercial spaceflight participants, or you can also do research projects, research payloads. Then they've got a couple different configurations for that. Single payload locker will have 25 pounds or 11.34 kilograms. Is that right? I tried to do the math and I'm not sure if I did it correctly. And then double is exactly double. So 50 pounds or 22.68 kilograms. They're going to be however big, et cetera, and just as an added side note, they are hiring for both their Washington and Texas facilities, and there's internships that are available, although this last couple of internships just filled up. The last deadline was May 1st, so I apologize for not getting this to you guys earlier, but the coming up spring internship, you can get your resumes in or applications in by October 1st, which is really exciting.
But the big deal there, what you saw was a reusable first stage, although that particular first stage
didn't get to be reused.
Had an issue. It will not be reused, but they've got more.
Yeah, they have a couple more, so they'll be able to just reconfigure another one
and a dummy spacecraft up top with parachutes that would have been a very smooth ride, according to...
Very successful recovery on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would have been a spacecraft that would have been for suborbital flight. So you'd be able to go up and take your suborbital flight on that spacecraft and that reusable booster.
Oh, I didn't mention up to 6 humans if they do all humans, they can do the
Can
mix.
they do like a mix of cats and dogs, or what's the...
Wow. Thanks. I don't know, if you shove one in one of their little lockers, maybe.
The other interesting thing about that is that the rocket engine there is a hydrogen-oxygen engine.
Yeah, which is hard because containing hydrogen is not fun, man.
It's really tough. There's only been about 6 of those engines ever developed. Yeah, 6 or 7 of those engines ever developed. So
the other hard thing is that they can throttle it pretty deep. So,
that's right.
And that's a big deal for landing, because when they're bringing the first stage back down, you need to be able to kind of throttle your engine down as you're getting closer to land. Otherwise, you just kind of bounce off the land, so to speak. So they developed a really cool engine in the BE3. Really cool They've also got their BE4 engine that they're working on, which is liquid methane and liquid oxygen, I believe.
Yep.
And that's for the next generation. We're going to call it the Atlas 6 instead of the Vulcan. So that's what I'm hereby referring to it as the Atlas 6.
All right.
And finally, VAX.
Okay, so SpaceX, this is coming up. This is not news that's happened yet, but this is coming up this week.
The news of tomorrow.
The news of tomorrow today.
The news of tomorrow, yep.
We really need to watch this, because this is one of the most amazing things that any private company has ever done. This is a pad abort test of the Dragon 2 capsule, where they're going to essentially launch the capsule from the ground from their Slick 40 Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral. It will include a human analog dummy named Buster. We don't think this is the same Buster from Mythbusters, but it might be. But there will be a SpaceX webcast. This is on Wednesday, May the 6th.
This is no earlier than Wednesday, May 6th?
No earlier than NET, May the 6th. And they already delayed it one day from May the 5th, I think. So keep an eye out for the SpaceX pad abort test coming up, hopefully, possibly this next week.
Yeah.
This is the first test that they need to do to show a propulsive escape of the human-rated capsule from a vehicle that would be having some kind of an issue that they needed to get away from a booster that was failing.
A rapid unscheduled disassembly, so to speak?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
There will be a later test this year of an in-flight abort where they're actually going to take essentially a first stage of a Falcon 9 and take it all the way up through what's called max Q, the region of maximum dynamic pressure of the air around the vehicle, and do an in-flight abort at that point.
That's one of the hardest points because,
That's
as you
really
mentioned,
tough,
Max,
yeah.
it's where you've got you still have air density, but you've got a lot of velocity.
Yep.
Right? So as you get higher up, your air density has gone down.
Your air density is going down.
Your velocity is increased, but you don't have as much air density, so it's not
Right.
pressing against the vehicle as much. But this is that perfect combination of speed and thickness of air,
Yeah.
where it's really, really hard against the
Yeah.
vehicle.
It's actually a little bit right above the speed of sound. You actually get a little bit extra buffeting and dynamic pressure. This is the point. We got to remember. This is the point at which they actually lost Spaceship Two this last fall. Was right at their point of maximum dynamic pressure. So this is a very difficult thing to do, and so watch for that later this summer.
And I don't know of any other vehicles that have done an in-flight test at max Q.
The Orion has not yet done one.
Is it scheduled to? Because that's going to be cool if it does.
They must. I mean, they have to be doing. They have to be.
Well,
I can't imagine that they wouldn't.
Well, we haven't ever, like, in the history.
They've done a pad abort test.
In the history of space vehicles, I don't think we've done max Q abort tests before, have we? Even in the Apollo era?
I don't know.
I don't know that we have. We may have. All right, Internet, I'm hereby asking you, because Internet, you are smart. In the history of human spaceflight, has anyone done an in-flight abort test at max Q?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Like during Apollo, Gemini, or Gemini, depending upon your region of the world. Mercury, I did those out of order. The Russian program, has anyone actually done that? I wonder. I should probably jump back to the chat room and see what they're saying.
I will say really quickly that Garrett Reisman was very quick to point out that while the dummy is named Buster, and it may or may not be the Mythbusters Buster, that it is also very much so not his son, Buster.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right.
FYI.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, comments from last week's show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to tomorrow. Now, before we get started with comments from last week's show, shout out to all the patrons of tomorrow who helped make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the Patreon Plus subscribers. These are the people who contributed $2.50 or more. These are also the people who are going to get a copy of After Dark as soon as it's available. Now, we have been having delays in After Dark, and I apologize to all of the Patreon Plus and above subscribers. I mean, it's not been too terrible. It's only been a couple days, and frankly, I do expect that will happen for another week or two while we try to get our compression system back online from after the move. But once that happens, you'll get it much, much faster, kind of same day type of stuff. Oh, but wait, there's more. We've also got our Patreon subscribers. These are the people who've contributed 1 penny to the show. So as little as 1 penny per episode. That's up to 4 cents per month US. You get your name in the show as a thank you for helping us continue to produce this show week after week, month after month. And every single penny, every single dollar helps. Like I mentioned, we are crowdfunded, and this is what helps keep the lights on, the ones in front of us and the ones shooting the wall as well. You can find more information on how to crowdfund the show over at patreon.com/TMRO. We've got all the reward levels there. We've got all the different things like the goals. One thing that has been taking a little while is getting our store set up. I know that that's taking longer than normal. I'll tell you right now that the holdup isn't the store. We actually have the Amazon store. We have all the back end stuff, and we've almost got the account with the people who are going to make the shirts. What we're missing is in California, you're required to have a seller number. That is taking way longer than it should to get. And without that number, I can't sell you shirts. So I am working on that. I need to get that number. And once I have, it's this stupid little thing. I've got like everything else, and then you will have your shirts. So we'll start with shirts. It's a small swag store was our $1,000 goal. We'll start with shirts, and we'll do more things. I'm thinking of like some Fisher Space pens, laser etched with the Tomorrow logo. I thought that'd be kind of cool. Also open to other ideas. We're thinking some two-tone mugs where you get the kind of the inside color and then the outside's white with our logo that matches the stuff like that. I think it just really cool things that you guys would enjoy. That's not crummy, right? High quality stuff that is actually decent. And the neat thing is we're going to sell it basically at cost. So whatever it costs us to produce these, that's exactly how much we're going to sell it for, because we're crowdfunded, and this is just a way for us to say thank you and give you something while at the same time not going broke trying to subsidize it. All right, let's go ahead and get started with comments from last week's show. First up.
This one comes from Twitter, from Space Loss. Says 536 people, I imagine is what they're meaning, have been to space and only 11% women and 3% black. Problem equals minorities and space masters plus degrees. What can be done for inclusion? Hashtag TMRO.
I think, and I'll also ask Vax the same question. I think what we need to wait on right now is simply time. We need a culture shift in which anyone is welcome into the STEM industry, science, technology, engineering, and math. And if you go back even 10 to 15 years ago, it was very much so considered a male-only industry, anything in science, technology, engineering, and math, which means that you would have to be born fairly recently culturally for it to be acceptable for women and anyone else to be in these fields. And because of that, we need to purge out all that old mentality and wait for this new, because I feel like, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I feel like today it is absolutely acceptable for anyone to be in STEM, right?
Yeah.
There's no black, white, purple, pink, brown, doesn't matter, male, female, we don't care. Anyone can be in STEM. I feel like that is culturally accepted today, but we need to wait for, like, everything kind of moves, right? Right. So we need to wait for that to move a little bit further to the right, at which point we will see more women, more minorities in STEM, I think.
Yeah.
And we also women and minorities have to choose to go into STEM fields too, right? It's not like men are sitting here going, you can't, well, anymore, you can't be in this field. Well, they used to.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
right, they did. And you got to think that the youngest astronauts are probably 30-ish years old. Okay, and the culture shift that we've seen is probably only 10 to 15 years old. So it's going to take another 10 to 15 years to really see that balance, specifically for women, to be able to see that.
I don't think it's specific to women. I think it's minorities too.
It's minorities too.
I think you're right. I think about 10 to 15, maybe 20 years. You just have to flush out the old mentality and kind of bring in the new stuff, which is, the new mentality is, it doesn't, what's it matter?
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Yeah, if you want to do it, absolutely go do it. We're starting to see that now, right? I mean, even 10, 15 years ago, you really wouldn't see that many women. You'd see a spattering of women inside of an aerospace company, and you see a lot more now. It's certainly not even close to 50-50 like it should be, but you do see a lot more now, which is a good sign. It's trending in the correct direction. Unfortunately, I think the cold, harsh reality is it's just going to take more time.
Yep.
So that's my opinion.
My software team at work is 4 engineers and a manager. Okay, so we're kind of a small team, but there's 2 blacks, an Asian, and 2 white guys from the suburbs. So I'm actually in the minority in my department, which is a good thing. I'm totally happy with that.
That's
actually,
funny.
we really should be looking for a point in time where we don't even think of this stuff. There is no minority. There is no men or women.
I kind of have to go. Right.
It's not. It doesn't. It just doesn't.
Oh yeah. He is a whatever, or she is a.
Yeah. I mean, who cares?
Who cares?
What does it matter at all? All right. Anyhow, moving on.
Next comment comes.
We're done with that one.
Wow. Comes from Winter Fraud from YouTube.
Winter Freud.
Freud? Oh, sorry.
Freud?
Freud?
Freud. I don't know.
I'm still going to go with that. After watching this video, I went to look to see if there was SEDS at my university, became really excited about seeing Sheffield in the UK map, and then really sad when learning it wasn't at the University of Sheffield, but at Sheffield Hallam University. SEDS, that of course is referring to the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. That was the interview that I did last week.
Very well, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And kind of like Hannah was saying, if there isn't one at your school, then make one. Because if there's at least one of you that wants one, there's probably going to be at least another one of you that wants one as well. So that to me says that is a huge opportunity.
Be the change you want to see. I don't know who said that. It's slightly cheesy, but it's absolutely true, especially in the aerospace industry. If you want to see change, do it. You are empowered to do these things. Also, consider doing a space up, right? If you're going to start a SEDS, also start a space up. Also, as a final little note, if you're in school and you're the one who starts SEDS, that looks really good on your resume.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I mean, be that person. Be the person that changes humanity. start some of these clubs, start some of these things, get the word out there, get people excited about this stuff. Good will come of that. All right, moving along.
Very good. Yeah. Also coming from YouTube, this one is from
This one is self-serving.
a little bit. So Bjorner Iverson says, this show deserves 1,000 times more views. What's wrong with the world?
Only 1,000 times more views? No, actually, it is slightly our fault. I wanted to point out we don't do marketing at all. You don't see Facebook ads, you don't see Twitter ads, you don't see billboards, you don't see us going out and doing anything. We do nothing. Now, I'm open to suggestions, but I feel that instead of doing marketing, I wanted to spin up space pods, and I wanted to do more content that was compelling, and you kind of organically find us. And then we use you to market the show. So when you find stuff you like and you tweet it out, everyone in your timeline finds it, or you post it on Facebook, or you post it on Reddit, or wherever you may post it. So you are our marketing arm today. Now, if you disagree and say, okay, well, actually, if you spend $20 over here, you'll reach X number of people who are actually interested in this stuff. Then yeah, I'll spend $20 because I want to find people who are interested, or even people who maybe don't know that they're interested yet. That's really my target audience, is the people who have forgotten how awesome space is a way to remind them. Hopefully this show helps them. So if I can spend $20 to remind someone how awesome space is, yeah, I'll do that. But it's really hard to say, oh yeah, no, spend $20 over here and you remind people how awesome space is. So instead, we use you, and hopefully the show is sticky enough, and the space pods, oh my God, Jared's last space pod, I think is some of the best content that has ever been on our channel, Space Vidcast or Tomorrow. It was absolutely terrific. I love the way he shot it. I love the cluster behind him. It's kind of like got some astronomy, also chaos behind him, which is exactly how I view
Jared.
Everyone, but that's how I view like most people in the
I suppose.
It was absolutely right. I mean that's how it is. That's how it is. Really. And it was so great. It was so great. I just feel like Jimmy Fallon. So great, so great. That's where we're spending our time and effort, and that's why we don't have thousands of views yet. But we're getting there. We're building slowly, and I think that by adding these additional shows, we'll do better stuff. All right, next up.
This one comes from Patreon. This is from John Burstead. Says, TARDIS, the original CubeSat.
I just thought it was a hilarious comment, so I wanted to include it. All right, and finally this week, continuing my lame tradition of having someone tweet in that isn't part of the actual tomorrow hashtag.
One day these people are going to be very upset.
One day someone's going to tweet these people and be like, did you know you were on this show? And link to it. But here you go.
Very confused. This one, of course, comes from...
iSARS9?
iSARS9, which is... great name. From Twitter says, 21 days of fasting. What shall I break my fast with tomorrow?
I have an answer. Astronaut ice cream.
Oh, yeah. We should actually answer this, girl.
Yeah, astronaut ice cream.
Totally.
That is actually...
I like that.
Shout out to the community.
Yeah.
You all need to tweet iSARS... Bring this graphic back up. Bring it back up. Yeah, iSARS9. Answer that tweet with astronaut ice cream. Everyone needs to answer that.
TMRO.
Hashtag TMRO. There you go. All right, that's our show for this week. Vax, thank you so much. Emory, I call you Vax because I know you as your screen name.
You're not the only one, which is kind of fun.
So Vax, thank you so much for coming on the show and sticking through the whole absolute thing. It was a lot of fun. You're going to stay with us a little bit longer for After Dark, which is going to be a slightly compressed After Dark because we're going to be putting you on an airplane soon. Yes. So for those of you who are watching live, stay tuned. After Dark is up next. Otherwise, if you're a Patreon Plus subscriber, check out your Patreon feed. After Dark will be in there. Everyone else, it'll be available in 4 weeks. Thanks so much for watching. See you next week.